Hi and welcome to the channel, where I will try to review and give you my point of view on some of the hardware I come across day to day, as well as give you a glimpse on its features. Today I will be reviewing the EdgeRouter V2 firmware from Ubiquiti and its usability in 2024, with a plan to review the V3 firmware, which is currently in release candidate 9 as of late October 2024. Now let's start on the website, which despite the age of some of the release of these devices is still fairly active, and all of these devices are still in the recommended tab despite them having newer switches and routers from the UISP range. But let's just get straight to the device and go through the initial setup wizard. The first time you unbox the device, you will need to set yourself up with a static IP address, as these do not output DHCP out of the box. So usually you will want to set yourself up to something like 192.168.1.2 to 254, as one is already occupied by the router itself. Now I do love the old Windows 10 networking interface, but I'm sure you can figure out how to do this on the Windows 11 interface. So I'm just going to go OK here and get straight to the setup here. So by default, once you unpack a device, the username will be just UBNT and UBNT. Okay. This should get us straight into the setup wizard. Now this is V2, we probably don't care, so we're going to say don't share. Alright, let's just exit out of this, and here we are just seeing the grayed out interface in the background, which we'll get back to later on today. So this time I will just start the basic setup wizard and just explain the basic difference within the wizard. Now the devices, which I'll get to later on, come in two different types, the MediaTek and the Cavium, with in general the primary difference being that the MediaTek use software to route traffic across the network ports. So it's like having all the LAN ports bundled, and the throughput is limited by a total of one port, where the Cavium devices have independent ports and each port can pull a separate 1 gig. So let's go back to the setup wizard. One other difference is as the ports are actually not properly subdivided on the hardware level with the MediaTek versions. You will have certain limitations as in how many LAN networks you can set up. Now with the Cavium you can generally set up 2 or more if you really wanted to, or you can make each port a separate LAN, where with the MediaTek devices you're limited to 1 or more WANs and 1 LAN. Okay, so let's just get to here with the basic setup wizard. Now in this case I am using the EdgeRouter 12, which is probably still on here somewhere. There it is. I'm not using the P version, which comes with a 24 volt passive. So I just have the normal version, and this is the one that we will be briefly reviewing today. Okay. Now the click is not working. Oh, because we have not done the setup wizard yet. Alright, that makes sense. I have for this exercise disabled my normal network cable, so that the results we get are truly based on this modem or router, so to say. Now since the Edge interface, the EdgeRouter 12 out of the box can support two separate WANs, you actually do get a choice In this case, we're just going to leave it at ETH9. And in case you did need to set up DHCP or static, now especially PPPoE, you will want to do this here because it is very difficult for a new user to set up after the fact. And this is where you would specify if you did needed to use a VLAN for your internet provider. In Australia down here, some of them have commonly 100 or 2, but most of them do not require anything and get given all the settings by the networking device provided by the internet provider here, which some of you might know is called the NBN, which is technically not the internet provider, but they host all the underlying structure. Now we'll go back to the basic setup in a minute. Let's go through the options in the wizard that we got here. So the first option is fairly straightforward. Load balancing. We would be balancing 2 internet connections. And again, similar to the basic. Here we would specify the LAN port. If we wanted to change the IP address range, we preferably want to do this here. Again, for a new user, it will be fairly tricky to change it after the fact. It's easy once you've done it once or twice, but after, as a new user, it might be a little bit tricky. All right, now these things you generally want to all leave enabled. If you want to set up a user, which is very recommended, please do this here. I will briefly show you what this can be done later. And I'm not really sure why they have an additional internet port option here. I guess if you wanted a third one. Okay, now load balance 2. This is very similar to the first one, except you will have a bit more flexibility in how you tweak things. Switch will basically turn this EdgeRouter 12 into, I guess in this case, I mean technically when I'm physically counting them, it's 11, 12 ports, yeah, and a console port. So you could turn this into a dummy switch. Now these options here, that message is very annoying, it's very common. It's basically WAN and 2 LANs, and very similar to the above with sorry, I think this is WAN. Here, 1 WAN, 2 different LAN setups. Now this is internet setup plus, again, similar to this above one. I mean, you can probably take your time and read through the documentation on here. In here, some of you guys might want to enable UPnP. You probably, in this case, want to enable, sorry, internal, we would set it to the switch, external to 9. For security reason, I do not recommend enabling this, but if you choose to do so, this could have some benefits if you play, for example, an Xbox or PlayStation, as well as multiplayer online games. It will allow those games to actually open up technically a firewall port to the outside world directly to the device, allowing them for better or more reliable connections, or just, you know, faster connection to the internet. Okay, but we're going to get started here on the basic setup wizard. In my case, because ETH9 is plugged into my main network here, I will just leave it at that, but you would pick whatever suits you best. Everything else I would recommend you just leave default. You can specify your own DNS provider if you really wanted to, and because they were very nice, you can just pick public DNS and route, you know, so you don't need to enter this manually. Okay. For our setup, we're just going to bridge all the LAN interfaces into one, and that means that these interfaces here will become the internal network. I'm going to say create new user, because in V2, which is where we're at here, 209 hotfix 7, which is the latest one, came out, I'm gonna say probably sometime last year, but don't take my word for it. I will show you shortly how to change it. Okay, now I will specify a password here. In V2 you are not being forced to change the password during the setup wizard. In V3, as soon as you log in, which they might resolve at some point, you will be asked to change the password, which you'll be basically forced into changing again once you're on the wizard. But I will go over that in the V3. Now I've already prepared an account for the V3 here, which I'll be using. So I will just set it up here. That way we do not need to do this in the V3. Or technically I'll do it in the V3 because I will factory reset it. Now I don't really mind enabling this. Some of you might not like getting the devices to report back any statistics. This will be purely your choice. In my case, I'm just going to set this up by default, EF9. I will set a user. On V3, this will need to be 12 characters. I've had issues where if you make it more than 12, the device does not work or it does not allow you to log in. So 12 characters, upper, lower number symbols. On V2, they do not have any requirements whatsoever as far as I'm aware. Again, I might be wrong. So feel free to put in whatever you want in here and it will tell you if you're wrong. So I'm just going to go create new user and go apply. Yes. Reboot. Yes, I'm sure. A little bit redundant to be asked 6 times if I wanted to reboot, but it is designed as a device for professionals. And with the experience I've had with it, they do work. They are very reliable. They usually, if you program them once, they set and forget. I can't think of any situations where I needed to go back in there and change something, unless we're just making active changes. So let's just wait this out and the device should be up and running shortly. Now the EdgeRouter 12, they do restart, I'm gonna say probably in about 30 seconds. But you know, the more entry-level devices might take longer, so I would not be surprised if something like a ERX, which is probably the lowest of them and still fairly capable for its age, could take a couple of minutes to restart. So I will fast forward this part. I can see the networking interfaces on the router physically popping off and back on. We can see down here that it is dropped. It just dropped. It should be up and running shortly. Yeah, in IT, on anything network related, watching this lovely ping bar is part of life. But I'm sure some of you guys don't mind. All right, that did not take long at all. So this refresh button on the middle of the screen does not always work. If it doesn't, just hit the refresh up in your browser. Now, since we did change the password, it will be whatever you set it, but by default it will be UBNT, so it will be UBNT, UBNT. In my case, this is not the case because I did change it during the setup wizard, which is obviously highly recommended. Now the WAN interface on this device is never open by default, so you don't really need to worry about it, but it's more about the people that are inside the house. Okay, now the reason we got taken back to the setup wizard, which might confuse a few of you, is because we left it here and for some reason it's not smart enough after the restart to just take us back to the main interface. So we will just zero this out to go back to the main interface. Okay, and this is what we should be seeing the first time we log in. Okay, now at the moment, top right, it seems to be connecting to UISP. So let's get started on this. I'm going to pause and start in a second again. All right, we're back at the main interface. Now I will just briefly skip through this because this is actually my second take on recording this. So some of the basic changes you will need to make will be down here. Not very straightforward. Down bottom left corner you have a little systems and an alerts tab. The alerts tab will basically ping you there every time you make any system critical changes. In this case I will just rename this to V2. I mean, I don't really care about the time zone because this is just going to be for the demo here. Okay, now if you did use UISP, and I may refer to it by its original name sometime here during the video. If it just slips out, I don't think I'll ever truly get used to that. This is where you would enter your key. It will basically send a signal to wherever the server is hosted that monitors this, and it will show you, it will log statistics. UISP is fairly basic still, even though it's 2024, but it is designed for monitoring the device statistics on the ports. If you had multiple users on there, multiple networks, dropouts, internet usage report, it's fairly useful. In this case, we're not going to do this, and make sure you do not tick this. Sorry about that if you heard any buzzing. I was getting some Teams messages. Most of these I would recommend you just leave default. If during the setup wizard you did specify a static IP address, it will actually be shown here if you manually entered your static settings. Now this here you might want to specify, which I think will look, realistically this is not important. The DHCP part, which I'll glance over through later on, is important. This part is not important, but this is if you wanted to give it a domain name or system name. We already have a host name, so we'll just leave it at that. Now SNMP, for some of you that know or don't know, is basically going to enable the device to be monitored by outside devices. So in this case, on the EdgeRouter range, it's going to be fairly simple, but it is a little bit similar to the UNMS. I will disable this because for some people they will see that as a security problem. If it's inside your house, it does not really matter. Now, if you are deploying this in a shared environment, shared workspace, a data center, which is where we had this option here, you will be probably forced to disable, as this will be broadcasting certain traffic on the network looking for other UBNT devices, and a lot of providers or shared environments will actually flag that as a security issue because it is flooding the logs with your traffic looking for other UBNT devices. You can enable it briefly just to see what's around you, which come to think of it, I don't actually know if it shows up in this interface anyway. It does show up in UNMS. It will show you all your surrounding devices. But yeah, I'm just used to using UNMS for a lot of the monitoring. Okay, this is where you would make a backup of your configuration, as well as restore the configuration, restart the device. I mean, most of these are self-explanatory. Factory reset, reset configuration. I mean, you can see the difference here in regard to what the difference is between these two buttons is. Okay, now if you are upgrading to V3 firmware or upgrading your firmware, you will basically just go download it. I will just briefly show you. ER12 in this case, I'm using the non-P model. Okay, you would just basically download this file. It will download a zip file. In here, you do not unzip the zip file, you leave the zip file intact. You will just select it, V2, select the hardware, or sorry, the firmware, and go upload. Now, I probably should have not done that. My mistake. I thought it will prompt me again. Now, if you are switching between versions 2.08 to 2.09, and I've seen sometimes even between hotfixes, when this upload happens, you may actually get a pop-up message that says the upload failed, or there's an error message. Do not worry about that. And just wait till this is done and you click away the message, you restart the router, and it will actually have updated. Okay, now this is the same case. Yep, this is exactly the message you will be seeing. So if I was on 2.08 and updating to 2.09 hotfix 7 up here, or if I'm on 2.09 hotfix 2 and updating to 7, you will very likely get this message. Again, don't worry about it, just reboot the router and call it a day. Now I'm hoping I will not need to reboot, because we are already on the same firmware version, but let's see if we have any errors. Okay, I will just close this down. So first, before I get to the next part, as I explained at the beginning, we have two types of the devices. Okay, now both of them will have hardware offloading disabled. Very annoying. I do not know why they do that. It actually has a, oops, sorry, that is still running. It actually has a huge impact on performance, which I will attempt to show you. It is a little difficult to show. Now this is just pinging one of these little routers here. As we can see, the CPU usage is in the 80% range, 82, 87, 87. Okay, that is done. We did get the full gig. That is purely because this I think is a quad-core machine, is fairly capable as a router. The hardware in it is specifically designed for routing purposes. Even if you max it out at 100%, it will generally perform as intended. I have not seen it stutter or give me slower than expected internet results. Okay. Now, what is recommended for all of these devices is to enable hardware offloading. Now, I will leave a link to this in the YouTube comments below. Now, because I am using the ER12, we will not be doing this here, but it is the same. You literally just copy paste that in the command prompt. So I will just go that SSH. Now, what did we set the username for this again? Okay. Now, if your device was UBNT, still, you would just say UBNT at 192.168.1, and what? So this would be whatever the router address is. Okay, now in this case it failed because I have connected to this device before. Let me just quickly delete it. Now, if you do experience this problem, you basically can just go here. Now, this is usually a hidden folder, which you can enable through view hidden. I'll just delete both of these. Okay. Let's go back up again. You will just say yes. I mean, the password I set is just UBNT123456 exclamation mark, but I'm just too lazy to type it. All right, now there is a little weird scenario with V3. I will go through in the V3 video. But here I'm just going to copy paste this in here. As in regard to connecting via SSH, if you do not have the SSH client installed on Windows, you can probably Google that on how to add it. Generally it's in there out of the box. It could be because I am using the Windows Enterprise versions, as I deal with a lot of Microsoft environments. Okay, in your case, if it's not, you're free to use PuTTY. Okay, where did that go? No. So EdgeRouter 12p, I will just copy paste this. Paste anyway, it'll give me a little winch. Now make sure at the last line you say commit and save. Otherwise the changes you just copy pasted in there will actually not be effective. Now because these devices are fairly quick, this would have just reset a couple of things. You might be expecting a couple of seconds downtime, and we should be up and running. Okay, now let me just do the same test I did before, and if you recall, we were getting 82, 87% CPU usage. Exact same test. I'm just gonna go up. All right, so we are going to probably get to about 35. Yep, I was just about to say, for the same test. Okay, same internet speed, same everything. Now this is running multiple iPerfs to the same server. They're both 1 gig at each side in this case, so 1 gig is the max you can expect, and this router is 1 gig. But as you saw, the difference is something around 30 to 50%, depending how you see it, just by enabling the hardware offloading. Again, I will leave this in the comments below. Let's close that. So now that we're done with hardware offloading, I will actually start going through some of the options we have in here. I do have a warning, top right corner, reboot is needed. I'll do that before I resume, so give me a minute. Sorry about that. So we are back at the interface. I just see that. Curious, this might be enabled out of the box. Alright, does not matter. Let us do that and save. Okay, we are here at the web interface. Now I will kind of just rush through this because I've got a meeting in about 15 minutes. So, I mean, this is the basic dashboard. You can see all your traffic happening all the way at the top. On the left you get basically basic statistics, nothing fancy. If you did have a million net rules, which will probably be your best friend. I mean, depends how you're deploying these. If they're at home, most of these things you will probably not touch. Okay, this is just all, is probably a commonplace. I've never individually had to click these. I just like this interface. If you did need to make certain changes, like let's say you're on static and your static address changes, you can just enter it here, or you can just, if you were on DHCP, you're changing to static, you just do it here. I'm not going to show you exactly, but you can just have a look at this. Enter it, and it generally just works. Now this one does have a PoE pass-through. We're not using that. Okay, this here will be probably the most common interface you will be assigning things to, unless for some reason you will have a firewall rule or something that's going straight to a particular port. Now again, some of these limitations are not available on the more entry-level units. Again, I do not have an exact list which ones are which and which ones supported, so you could probably just go, I mean, sorry, technically I do have a list, but I'm not 100% sure if this is the complete list, because I'm pretty sure there's a handful of routers that are not on here. So where was the interface? All right, now I will basically just go through the top quickly. In here, DPI, the packet inspection, is disabled by default. This is a business router, so they might have something else. In a home environment, you probably want to enable it. Now, if you do enable this, it does have a performance penalty. And as you see, bottom left corner, we were given an alert that that is a significant change. I will just click it away because it is going to drive me mad. Okay, actually, while we do this, let me just set Steam to download something so we can see the throughput. Again, any throughput limitations you see, this would be purely Steam related. I do only have a 1000 down connection and 50 up. I'm just uninstalling a game. It's only 60 gigs. All right, let's set that to install again. Now in general, this router will not struggle with any of this. 1 gig, it won't even break a sweat properly. If anything, the bottleneck will be your computer hardware, especially in Steam, because it is decompressing the stuff. So we're getting 800-ish meg down. This would be a Steam, and I do have a number of other things happening in the house. Okay, I'll leave that running. Traffic, now that we've enabled DPI, it will actually break this down, but it is fairly basic. There is no certificate in the middle, so no proper inspection possible on this device, as far as I'm aware. Alright, routing, for most home users, you will probably never touch this, as well as OSPF. Again, this is probably something more data center or multiple complex networks. Firewall rules, they should be explanatory. Port forwarding, you can just do down here. This is probably what you'll be using this most commonly. You select the WAN interface depending on the device, do the ports. Now this usually works fine, not always 100% success rate. I'm not sure why. At least I've had bad luck with ports, but that could be because I have used this in a more advanced environment where a lot of stuff were restricted. So we just used to use the net rules as well as firewall policies. Okay. Now firewall policies. Now these are very intense, can be very annoying, very complicated, and if you are not from a networking environment, these may not make sense. What I used to do is make firewall policies, and I would just copy them and adjust them. So if I needed to route something through one static IP address and go to a particular device, and then make that device a route out, will actually be done through net rules, through that static IP address. I would just make basically templates. I don't call them template. I would just copy an existing rule and then just go click. They are ordered top to bottom. So top being overruled by anything below it. Okay, now that is the same case with the net rules. Very capable. Again, it might take you a little bit to figure all of these out. So you might have to look at if anybody has tutorials out there. I'm thinking maybe Chris from Crosstalk Solutions and maybe Willie Howe might have solutions on these. Again, I might be wrong. You can just Google it and figure that out. Okay, this here probably most people will not use, but as I said, this device is very capable and is still fairly commonly used today because these devices are still on the recommended choice for the all wired. Okay, these here we still have deployed everywhere. They sold out a lot. They do stock up a lot. The next best on top of the ERX would be the 6. It's not far from the 12, but it won't be a matter of ports, what you need, etc. Back to the router. Firewall rules. Okay. DHCP. Now this is something you might need to modify. Now I will just set my my internal things to DHCP just to so you see what that looks like. All right, now this will not auto refresh. I will just close it and open it. There's my lease. So that is my computer. It automatically picked it up. Okay, I can just say static and call this whatever I want, and I'm done. So I would restart my computer and it will automatically force it to be on 66. And this is how you would do firewall rules. Keep in mind, you can't really do this with most common mobile phones these days because they usually have the random MAC address thing enabled out of the box. Now you can do this here as well. You just create new mapping, MAC address, give it a name. It would be usually the device name, the IP address, and you hit save. Oh, why did that not show up? Yeah, I'm not sure why the details tab that didn't come up. Now this is the default range, so I would usually do this something like 25 and 200. Oh, that is too many numbers. Okay, it's a little bit weird. Did I do something? Oh, it could be because I changed my myself to DHCP. We can still ping it, can't we? Yeah, so that's still up. Now usually if you did log in, it's persistent until you close your browser, which is pretty good. Okay, I am not sure why this is taking so long. All right, come on, come on. I'm just gonna stop it here for a sec and restart the device. All right, sorry about that. I'm not sure what it's done. It's possible because I changed myself to static that my device freaked out on my computer. So here we're just going to, we are in services. This is the default DHCP scope. You can actually have more than one. View details. Now most of this is common. Specify your DNS. Domain name. Now if you are using this in a server environment and you use Active Directory, it might be .local. Again, .local not being recommended these days, but again, whatever your legacy Active Directory might be set up, this is where you might need to input it. You would probably point a DNS to the Active Directory server as primary, and if you have a secondary failover, you point it to that. Otherwise, maybe point it to Google. Now, the Unify tab here may be useful for some of you guys because this is where you would want to enter it, which is, I think, option 43. Again, don't take my word for it. By default, this will send the inform command for any Unify device you plug into your network to an outside resource. So if you did have a Unify controller hosted offsite, you just enter that here and it will automatically show up in the outside controller. Now I know these days you can actually do this in the app, mobile app. Now I don't need to rush through this. All right, this would be just, this is a legacy thing, so I don't recommend using this VPN for getting into the making this the, sorry, VPN server. IPsec site to site works very well. For if you are using Unify at the other site, you would just leave it all default. Probably this would be the default setup. If you are using a non-unified device, you would specify whatever the other side has. Again, I'm not going to write through how to set this up. Now, this device is fairly known for QoS. The QoS is pretty good. It does require knowledge on how to configure it, and I have a feeling that Chris from Crosstalk Solution might have had a guide. We're talking 5-7 years ago, probably more. So you can just try Googling this and see all the settings you'd need. Set it up, WAN interface. Now it had few different modes for the QoS. Okay. Now users, this is basically where you would be creating a new user, logging into it, then going back here and removing the UBNT if you did leave it, or if you needed to edit an existing user. Okay, now the config tree is basically where all the buttons and capabilities for the device converge. This is where you can change everything. It is very intense. It may not be straightforward on what you're changing or what you're doing or what you're adding. So this is basically like running the command prompt, except you kind of have visual cues of what you're doing. And then the last thing is basically back to the wizard, if you did need to rerun the wizard again. Now keep in mind, when you rerun the wizard, it basically clears a lot of your configurations. So this might only be suitable at the start. Toolbox is basically you got ping, bandwidth, trace, discover, packet capture, and logs. Okay, now the main dashboard here does not actually go back very far. That is why UNMS is very important, because that can go back days, weeks, months, years. And UNMS is also going to keep backups of this. So if something happens to the device, you just grab the config, upload it to a new device, plop it in, and you're up and running. Okay, now is this device still good in 2024? For particular use cases, yes. It's very capable, very reliable, set and forget. If you like to change things frequently, or for basic home setup, I wouldn't recommend this. It's too complicated. There is no easy to use app, which everybody loves these days. It's basically this web interface or no interface. So if you have a very particular setup, if you need the internet to be up and running all the time, 24/7, these are very good. The load balancing is very good, very quick. The latest range of the normal unified products with the failovers is getting there, but this has been at that failover response time a decade ago. Okay, so I'm going to have to sign out here because I am running late to my meeting already. It is just an internal meeting, so it doesn't matter if I'm a couple of minutes late. Okay, and I hope to see you here again. Have a good day. Bye.